Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about parabolas and really just getting familiar with some of the terms that have to do with parabolas before we really get into them. So let's go ahead and get ourselves familiar with some of the words that are associated with parabolas. So here I have a parabola, okay? And this is what we actually call our parent function. That's your first word, parent function. I'll go ahead and spell it out for you real quick. Parent function. And what parent function means is that it's the original function that all parabolas are based off of, or that we manipulate to get every other parabola. This is kind of like the OG original parabola that we're going to go ahead and add stuff to it to get every other parabola. Okay, so that's what this equation is usually referred to as. It's as the parent function of parabolas. So cool, first word, already learned it. Now, the other words you might hear when people talk about parabolas, okay, next one I'm going to discuss is what we call the vertex. Okay, the vertex is the sort of point at which the parabola starts either to change direction, okay? It's the point at which this parabola changes direction. So here we can see that the parabola is going downward, 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 and then it hits this point, which is what we are going to call the vertex, because at this point is when it changes from going downward to upward. So this is what we call the vertex, and I label it just as I would any other point on a coordinate plane, with parentheses. This x value is 0, 0. Okay, and you can actually use the vertex to find, again, this is another term that's usually associated with parabolas, is the axis of symmetry. Okay, so that's my vertex. My vertex is the point, that kind of the only point on the parabola that's usually labeled most of the time. But we use the vertex to help us find what our axis of symmetry is. So the axis of symmetry is the line that you can draw through the middle of the parabola that makes both sides symmetrical. So if I draw a line going straight through the middle here, and we use our vertex sometimes to help us find where this line is, it's always the x value. So my axis of symmetry is seen there in the green, and it is x equals 0. Okay, so if you can find the vertex, you can find the axis of symmetry, or if you can find the axis of symmetry, you can find the vertex. Okay, so those are two other important sort of terms to become familiar with. A couple other terms are usually used when we describe the parabola. So for example, this is an example of a parabola that's facing up. It's opening upward, okay? The opening of the parabola, we're talking about this, is facing upward. Here's an example of a parabola that's opening downward, okay? It opens downward. Okay, I have a bunch of opening space facing downward. All right, that's another term you might want to become familiar with. All right, and these are kind of terms that you want to make sure you know before you start working with parabolas, because a lot of times parabola equations or questions about parabolas ask you for these certain things. They'll ask you, what's the vertex, what's the axis of symmetry, which way is your parabola opening. You know, you want to make sure you understand what they're asking you before we actually start getting to those questions. So this video is really just so that you become familiar with terms like vertex, axis of symmetry, facing upward, facing downward, how to find the vertex, how to find the axis of symmetry. This is just an introduction so that you know what these words are, okay? In the next video, we're actually going to be talking about how to manipulate this parent function, which we talked about that too, in order to move this parabola in a different direction, maybe change its shape. Definitely watch that video if you feel comfortable with these terms. As always, I just want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.